Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Hometown Heroes. I'm Mike Kenichi. I'm very excited today because we have a very special guest. She is what Michael Jordan is to his sport, what Serena Williams is to hers. She's a collector of 7 diamond rings, a 2-time U.S. Open champion, 3 gold medalists, and she's also got 5 WKA gold medals as well. And that's just to name a few. I am honored to present to you Miss Sammy Smith. And Sammy, welcome to the show today. It's a real honor.
Thank you for having me. That was a great intro. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be there. Thank you for comparing me to all those great athletes.
Well, it's
Yeah.
definitely true. And Sammy, I'll tell you, like I told you when we talked briefly that I'm not really a big expert on martial arts, but I got to
Mm.
tell you what you've done in such a short time, because I mean you've had 20 years of experience, but you're still a very young person, and just what you've done in that amount of time is incredible. So let me ask you, how did the love for martial arts begin? I mean, did you have a connection with your family? Was there a family member that was involved in it? How did it all start for you?
No, so actually, no one in my family did martial arts until I started, I should say. So what happened was how I got started was I saw a Gap commercial when I was 3 years old, and it was this kid doing karate movements. Like I didn't know karate at the time, but it looked like martial arts movements
Yeah.
for Gap, like the clothing company. And apparently, because I really don't remember this at all, every time the commercial would like come up on the TV, I would be drawn to it. Like I would come up and just stare at the television, like be mesmerized by what I
Yeah.
saw. So I guess like my mom, and my parents like kind of got the hint that I wanted to do what this kid was doing. So the funny story is I was 3 years old. The studio that I was gonna sign up at, you had to be 4 at the time to start karate.
Right.
Now it's like now he made it so like 3-year-olds can join. But at the time you had to be 4 to start martial arts. So I had to wait a whole year of doing it. And finally, I turned 4 years old. Actually, the date that I started karate was September 10th, 2001. So
Oh,
the
wow.
day before
Jeez.
9/11.
Wow.
Yeah, I started martial arts that day. And apparently, I don't really remember much, but from the moment that I started, I was just hooked onto karate. And the irony and like how this story kind of comes around full circle is that like later on, like years later, once I started competing, once I started, competing in the black belt division, like, years later, probably around 8 years later, I actually became teammates with the kid who I saw on the commercial.
Oh,
It was
wow.
crazy.
Yeah.
I think I have like one of the most unique how I got started martial arts stories and just how everything came full circle. Yeah, but that's where like my I guess the beginning of my love for martial arts began, even though I didn't know at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it started when I was 4 years old,
And
or
Sam,
3 actually. But yeah.
right. And Sammy, one of the things about any sport a kid does, especially at a young age, whether it's soccer, basketball, karate, whatever it is, they sometimes they get bored with it and they don't want to go to practice. They don't want to go perform stuff like that. And it seems like to me that's never happened to you, because you just seem like you've always been motivated to do this. And that's pretty impressive, because a lot of kids don't always stick with karate because it is a physical sport and it's a lot to retain. So
Mhm.
that's never entered your mind, has it?
Well, doing like quitting martial arts has never crossed my mind. I was the type of kid that like I wanted to be at the karate school every single day for as long as I could. And if I couldn't make it to like the studio for some reason, I would literally
Yeah.
cry and be like so upset and like mad that I couldn't come to class.
Yeah.
So it was never like about like wanting to quit martial arts. However, I do think that like when you're competing and you spend years and years and years competing and then you're at like the level of intensity that we compete on in the NASCA circuit, there's always these ups and downs in the season, whether it's like you didn't win a division that you wanted to win or you didn't win an overall that you wanted to win. And then you get frustrated, but then you get motivated. So I wouldn't say it's always like a constant like I never not want to do it, or I'm always in this like, yeah, like let's go. Like I think it comes in waves, but that's literally for everybody who takes this sport seriously, just because it is such. It's a physically demanding sport, but it's also a mentally demanding sport. And in order to excel, you need to be strong in both. And it definitely does test the mindset.
Yeah.
And I'm sure every other sport does as well, but I can't speak for any other sport because I only know martial arts. But in my sport, it definitely tests you mentally. So there is always going to be that wave of like what I said, like, and again, it's never been that I don't want to do. It's just that it does kind of like challenge you, and then you have to reevaluate, and then that's how you get better, and that's how you grow. But yeah, it's definitely been like a lot of ups and downs throughout my, I don't know, 17 years of competing and 20 years of doing martial arts.
Yeah, and the like I said, the very fascinating thing to me is how quick you just became so successful at it. I mean, obviously you had to work hard, and dedication comes a long way, but really, I mean, you came onto the scene in a very short time, and I think July of 2002 was like your first tournament, and you met a couple instructors there who would kind of be mentors to you. So just talk about them a little bit because they've played a big part in the early development of your career.
Yeah, so my first NASCAR tournament was the US Open, July of 2004.
Right.
I was an underbelt at the time, and I knew about the US Open because one of the girls at the karate school had gone to the US Open in 2003, and she got like the DVD from the tournament. And like she was like, "Oh, you gotta watch this. You gotta check this out. Like all these
Yeah.
crazy competitors." And to be honest, the first person that caught my eye was Taylor Lautner. If
Yeah.
you guys don't know who Taylor Lautner is, he's like the Shark Boy Lava Girl, but more well known for Twilight, being Jacob Black and all of that like craziness. And you could say that that was my first crush because I literally was drawn to this kid. I remember he had like blue gel in his hair, like all spiked up. He took his like gi top off for his open hand form, and I was like, whoa, this kid's awesome.
And I think didn't he do a couple doubles with like Becca Ross, who's very big in karate? I think he might have done stuff with her too. Correct? Yeah.
I'm not sure. I don't think so, but he was,
Right. I've definitely heard of him. Yeah.
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 Well, he caught my eye, and then later on, watching the DVD, these people, two guys, well, there was but like everybody I was like really impressed with, but for some reason, this guy named Matt Emig and this guy named Daniel Sterling
Right.
caught my eye, and when I went to the U.S. Open in 2004. I was just like, I was competing, but I was more of like a spectator because everything was like these were celebrities to me because I saw them on the DVD.
Yeah.
And I remember my dad, he had the DVD and he was like, "Oh, go ask them if they could sign it for you." So like little 7-year-old me went up to Matt and Daniel after they were done competing and was like, "Can you sign my DVD?" I don't know what I said. And they were like, "Yeah, sure, whatever." I took a picture with them, and then that was that. Then it was the next tournament after that. My dad saw Daniel in like the hotel lobby and went up to him and was like, "Can you take a?" I can't believe he said this now. Like it's funny to think about, but he's like, "Oh, can you take a look at my daughter's form and tell me what you think?" Like something along the lines of that. And this guy, again, I don't remember this, but I'm going off of stories I've heard. This guy literally says, "Show me your form," like right here in like the hotel lobby. And apparently I did it for him. And he was like, "All right, let me make a call." And he calls Matt because Matt and him are very close. And Matt lived in New York at the time, but Daniel lived in Massachusetts. So it's going to be a little bit harder for me to train with Daniel. But he was like, I think I have somebody. He called up Matt and he was like, "Oh, I have a student for you." And the rest was history from there. I started
Yeah.
working with Matt when I was 7 and Matt was 17. I was Matt's first private lesson student, like that took weekly lessons from him. But at the same time, of course, I didn't forget about Daniel. My parents would either drive me to Massachusetts or sometimes Daniel would come down to New York and we would train. It wouldn't be as often as training with Matt. But I honestly think that they both have had a great impact on my life, but I have a lot to be thankful with Daniel because of my lessons that I've taken with him over the years. They weren't only karate lessons, they were a lot of life lessons mixed in.
Yeah.
So I always give credit to Daniel for a lot of the things that he has taught me, just that I take with me throughout my daily life, not even just with martial arts.
Right. And Sammy, the other thing is too, I mean, when you're training like that all the time, it's not easy to keep up with schoolwork, but it sounds like it's never really affected you. If it has, you've never let it show. And we'll get to what you did in college later on, but I mean, it's never really affected schoolwork. So how were you able to balance all that as a young kid? Because that seems like that could be overwhelming sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I went to a public school, so a lot of people nowadays are actually homeschooled, and I
Yeah.
always wanted to be homeschooled. I was like, oh, all the people are homeschooled. Why can't I be homeschooled? But my parents didn't want me to do that, and I'm honestly thankful that
Yeah.
I wasn't homeschooled. It was definitely challenging. It was like kind of the thing where I had to ask for my schoolwork ahead of time and then do it on the plane or do it in the hotel room or plan ahead. Um, but it was definitely challenging to get everything done. But it really taught me to prioritize things at like a young age to make sure that I did my work and then I trained. And I've always been like that. I've always like when I come home from school, first thing I do, get my homework done, and then I move on to training from there. But it definitely forces you to be a little bit more organized than you usually would.
Right. And it didn't take really long for you to earn your first black belt. I think you earned it in Kempo karate. So talk about that a little bit and what was that like for you earning that first black belt?
My first black belt is actually a junior black belt,
Junior black
but
belt.
it's
Yeah.
still a very accomplished belt because there's a lot that goes into that. Like there's a lot of techniques that I had to learn, a lot of forms that I learned for this Kempo belt. It's a Japanese Chinese Kempo system. And I started martial arts, like I said, in 2001, and I got my junior black belt in 2008. Um,
Yeah.
but there was like at least 10 belts I needed to get past to get that black belt. But yeah, it was a really accomplishing feeling to complete that. That was my first system that I started in. So everyone wants to get to black belt. So the fact that, I earned that was, really accomplishing. And then not too long after that, I wanted to learn a different style. So I started taking Taekwondo lessons.
Right.
And I actually, throughout the years, have earned a third degree Taekwondo black belt
Right.
as well.
And explain to people who aren't familiar with martial arts, what is the difference between like karate, taekwondo? Because there's definitely a difference, but in a lot of ways they seem similar as well.
Well, to be honest, I am not the karate master of like the difference in different styles, but based off of my knowledge, because I have only done two styles in my life. There's tons of other styles, so I can't really speak for them. But Kempo is more like it's more of like a fluent movement. It's more parries and sweeps and takedowns. Pretty violent style, to be honest.
Yeah.
Um, and Taekwondo is more hard hitting, knife hand blocks, a lot of emphasis on side kicks and
Yeah.
kicking and that sort of thing. So one is like a little bit more of a soft style, I would say, and then the other Taekwondo is a little bit more hard hitting. So I think it's kind of cool that I have a mix of both of them because I definitely think that helps with just my style and what I bring into sport karate in my forms.
Right. And you got your black belt pretty quick compared to others because it takes several years to get it. So you kind of got it a lot quicker than maybe some people would. I mean, was it difficult going through the other belts to get to that? I mean, talk about that a little bit.
I don't think I got my belt like pretty quick because it did take me like started in 2001, got into
So about
it took
six
me
years.
7 years.
Yeah.
I know schools that like they'll give you your black belt in like 3, which I think is a little bit crazy. I definitely
Yeah.
think you need to earn it. But there is a difference between like I was the kid who wanted to be there every single day. So maybe if I did earn it quickly, it was just because I was there
Yeah.
a lot and I put in a lot of work and you know, that's something to take into consideration. but like, believe me, there was a lot that went into this like Kempo black belt. It was a very difficult style. There was a lot of techniques that you had to learn per each belt. There were a lot of traditional forms that you needed to learn to get this belt. There was a lot of like other things that you needed to do and prep and all that. So I'm not sure if it was like quick, but I just was really dedicated to. I loved martial arts, and that's the only thing I wanted to do. Still to this day, like
Right.
martial arts is like my identity, and I don't really have much of a life outside martial arts, and that's okay because I know that that's been my passion. It's been my
Yeah.
priority. It's part of my identity. So I'm okay with, not having the most exciting life, but it's my purpose. So I'm totally fine with that.
One of the things, Sammy, that when I watch, and like I said, I'm no expert, but when I watch different people compete and stuff like that, even though the sport may not get the recognition that maybe like the NBA or the NFL gets, to me, these competitors are the best athletes in the world because some of the moves you see them do, and I wanted to ask you too, like doing all the flips that you have to do and all these competitors have to do. I mean, do you have to do a separate training for that, like gymnastics or anything to learn that stuff? Because I mean, you all of you are so on cue with everything. It's just unbelievable.
Well, thank you. So the flips that you see is called tricking, and some karate schools actually have that part of their program in as part of their curriculum. Actually, where I started, it wasn't. However, there was a competition team, and like tricking was kind of new at the time. Like, believe it or not, I'm gonna sound so old, but like back in like 2002, 2003, you know a lot of exciting things were like if you're not in martial arts, you're probably not going to understand these terms, but like 540s and 720s were like the hard things that people were doing nowadays. Like if you can't do a 540, you can't do a 720, it's going to be a little hard actually for you to win. Like,
Yeah.
it's crazy how like the sport is just evolutionized throughout the years. But like I said, nowadays, like people have that part of their program. um not to plug myself here, but I'm going to plug myself here. Part of Black Belt Magazine, which is a super big martial arts company. Myself and my teammate Jackson Rudolph, we have
Yeah.
come up with a program called Sport Karate University,
Right.
and it's basically like a college-like program that you don't even have to know karate. You can just sign up and you can learn all the basics throughout all the advanced movements. And one of the majors that you could major in is tricking, and it teaches you like the fundamentals of just basic tricks and then working your way up into those advanced levels. So there are programs and there's things online like YouTube tutorials, stuff like that teach you tricking. But of course it wouldn't hurt, if you were a gymnast, it's probably easier for you to learn some of these tricks. Although trickers are kind of like when we throw our tricks, it's like almost like ugly gymnastics.
Yeah.
Like emphasis on pointed, like nowadays like everyone wants to have pointed toes or straight legs, so because like that makes tricks look better. But a lot of the things that we do, gymnasts would probably like cringe at a little bit,
Yeah.
because it's just like a stylistic thing, because you got to add an element of martial arts, so that it is realistic to what we do in our sport.
Right. Another thing that's really impressive about you, Sammy, is the fact that before you got your black belt, again, you were doing, commercials, things like that. I think as time went on, you were even in the movie The Defenders, things like that. But talk about doing these commercials. How did that come about? And that says a lot about how people felt, how you performed and stuff, because they're putting a young 6, 7 year old kid in these commercials. So I think there was a macaroni and cheese commercial you did, which was really impressive. There was the show Reeboks one, your moves,
Mhm.
show your moves or whatever. So talk about those a little bit.
Yeah. To be honest, I don't really remember them because it was such a long time ago, but I do remember like my first commercial that I did, I believe, was actually for a martial arts studio in Brooklyn, I want to say. And then that same guy that directed that commercial had a short film that he was trying to enter for Steven Spielberg's contest, to have short films, and they were going to make whatever film won into a movie, I believe. Unfortunately, we got like second place, but it was really cool to be able to film this short film called Sweet Tooth that was like probably the most acting I've done in something like that. But it was martial arts based. All the things that I've done have been around martial arts. I've never really done a commercial that was just straight up acting. I thought that's what I wanted to do when I was younger, but I'm just too attached to martial arts to fully commit myself to just acting.
Yeah.
So all the like the Kraft macaroni and cheese, the Reebok, the Sweet Tooth short film, the Defenders, like you mentioned, they were all martial arts based.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's your passion, and that's what it should be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you, since we're talking about commercials and films, I've said this, that when I watch you compete and stuff, there's two things I want to see when your career is all said and done. One, I think you need to be on an episode of Cobra Kai. I think that's a must. And the other thing is, I think you need to do one action scene in a movie with Cynthia Rothrock. I'm sure you're familiar with her. And just let me ask you, has that ever been a desire, either one of those things?
Oh yeah, I love Cobra Kai. I've like literally binge watched the last 2 seasons in like one day. Like when they came out, like that day I watched the episode season
4. Yeah.
3 and 4
Yeah.
like within one day. And I literally have said on like multiple podcasts before, like somebody needs to get me connected with somebody from Cobra Kai because Sam needs a person to like teach her nunchucks. There needs to be nunchucks in that show. I actually, ironically, do know a few people who have done stunts for that show, and I'm like, come on, guys, like you got to get me in there. So, I mean, you never know who's watching, so maybe somebody will be watching this that could has some connections to Cobra Kai. But I would love to be part of Cobra Kai. That would like literally, I would check off like on my bucket list. It's such a cool project to be part of, and it fits me so well. So I would definitely love like to be a part of Cobra Kai for sure. 100%.
And Hawks tends to be people's favorite character, but is there a favorite character on that show that you really like? I really like Dimitri because I root for the underdog and I feel like he's come a long way, but is there anybody in particular that's your favorite?
I don't know. To be honest, I like a lot of the characters because there was the show had a lot of character development for like everybody.
Yeah, which is very good. Yeah.
I really do. I don't know. I have to say I like everybody. Maybe Miguel I like, and yeah, I mean I don't know. It's too hard to pick, but I like too many of the characters. But I do have to say like Miguel is probably one of my favorite characters.
And being somebody that knows martial arts in and out, what is your impressions of the martial arts on there? Do you feel like they have everything down pat?
It gets me pumped up every time I watch it. It always makes me like want to train like traditional karate after watching that. Like every time I like would watch the show that they do scenes like in the studio where they're just like in horse dances doing like straight punches. I'm like, I should probably, work on that next time I train. It's always good. I always tell my students it's always good to go back to basics. So it's like a good reminder that like to watch a show and like you see like them learning the basics. It's like, I should probably do that too. So yeah, it always gets me like hyped up. And I think the karate on it is really good. The stunt stuff, they use a lot of the people that I know, like I've said, that kind of, so like, I'm like, oh, that's so-and-so. Actually, Matt Emig, one of the instructors that we talked about earlier, he was just in the last season and, he was in a couple episodes, I think, and you could actually like see his face and everything, and it was really cool to just be like watch it and be like, oh, that's Matt.
Right. You brought up nunchucks, and I wanted to ask you about that because even as a young kid, you were doing that, and those things maybe on TV don't look heavy, but they are heavy when I see them. So just talk about how was that difficult in the beginning? Because I know some people have tried that and it wasn't for them, but that seems to be the weapons part of martial arts seems to be your favorite thing, correct?
Depends on the day. Depends on the day.
Right.
The nunchucks that I use are actually not heavy because they're performance weapons. They are wood and they are it's like solid, but they're not heavy at all. And to be honest, my first pair of nunchucks was made of PVC pipe and rope. So those are extremely light. That was my first pair of nunchucks. They were like put together by these two brothers at the karate studio. So that was like really fun. But then as I, advanced in my sport karate career, um, I started using like different type of nunchucks that were like a little bit more realistic, but still performance weapons. So like what you see me using today is what I was using when I was like 10, 11. And yeah, they're not like that. They're not as heavy as you would think, but don't get me wrong, they definitely hurt when you hit yourself. I have like a bump under my eye that's
Ah,
been there since I was like 7. Not too long ago, I hit myself like really hard in the head, like before one of my tournaments, and I had like the biggest knot on my head. I actually took a trip to the hospital that night just to make sure there was no like really big damage. So yeah, that's fun. Always have bruises all over your body, like random bruises,
yeah.
like from when I was a kid, just from chucks, and it's just like normal. Like it's just like I don't even notice that that's how normal it is. Um, but yeah, not so I did nunchucks, and nunchucks been like my primary weapon. But over the years, I've also done bow staff, and I've also done commas. But I'm definitely well known for my nunchucks.
Right. And Sammy, let's get to 2008 because that was a big year for you, and you were able to compete in the Olympics, which is for any person in their sport, their profession, their life. That's a big thing to compete, and it's another thing to win. And you took home 3 gold medals. So let's talk about that experience because could you appreciate it then? Because you were maybe 9 or 10 years old. I mean, could you appreciate what that moment was like, or do you appreciate it more now that you're a lot older?
Well, I wish it was the Olympics. It was the martial arts Olympics, so a little
Okay.
bit different. They actually don't have our sport in the Olympics, but we've been trying to get that
Right.
going for years. So it was the martial arts Olympics in St. Petersburg, Russia, and that tournament had a lot of significance because the story behind that is that somehow word got out that a girl named Samantha Smith from the United States was coming to Russia to compete at this tournament. And during the Cold War with Russia, there was a girl named Samantha Smith that wrote a letter to President Putin saying that they didn't want the war and let's just have peace um, along those lines. And she became like a really big ambassador for world peace. And unfortunately, she was, killed in a plane crash with her
Oh,
father, which
man.
is really sad. But before all of that, she was like a super big ambassador, like went to all these like camps and spoke to all these children. So she became kind of like an icon. So when people from Russia heard that somebody named Samantha Smith was coming over, I guess it like kind of brought back this, I don't know, like they were, I guess, like super excited that somebody with that same name was coming.
Right.
I almost became like a celebrity there. Like people would stop me on the street. This guy bought me like a Russian doll in one of like the stores that they have there, which was really cool. And I even went to the government building, met the governor of St. Petersburg,
Right.
have President Putin's judo uniform and a signed picture of him. So it was kind of more like, whoa, this is like my moment of fame rather than a tournament. But it was cool that I actually did end up winning 3 gold medals. But I don't know if that was like the highlight of the trip. It was cool. And I get like, that was just like, it was cool to compete, but there was a lot more to that trip than just the competition. Um, I guess in the moment, I didn't really see how I was like, I just have the same name as this girl,
Yeah.
like it's whatever, I didn't probably realize like how big of a moment and how iconic of a moment that was probably going to be in my life. But it's definitely cool to talk about it now. Like I even wrote a letter to President Putin, kind of doing like the same thing that she did, like right, like all about the world peace and the other is Samantha Smith and this and that. But yeah, that's kind of the story behind that tournament. It was really fun though. It was definitely an experience.
Yeah. And around that same time too, Sammy, which this was in the early days of YouTube too. It wouldn't be what it wasn't then what it's become now. And I think you were doing stuff on YouTube, kind of teaching instructional things to kids, maybe like 5 minute videos, but you were still doing stuff like that. So I mean, to be doing that back in 2007, 2008, I mean, the thing of it is you matured pretty quick for a kid who was 9, 10 years old. Did you feel that way too? That like you were maybe a 9 year old inside a 16 year old's body because you really were very mature for a young kid your age.
Thank you. Yeah, I still feel like that, to be honest, today. I don't really feel it. I feel like I always say I feel like I'm an old soul because I literally like I don't get people, especially now in today's generation, like how they think is just I don't think the same way. I definitely think like, I just think that my priorities. I was just a very serious kid. I think that was what it was. I was like a very like I didn't have a normal childhood. Like I didn't have a lot of friends in school. My friends were like my karate friends that I saw at tournaments. That was my life,
Right.
all I cared about. I didn't care about hanging out with people in my school. I didn't care about going to like parties. The only school event that I ever went to was my prom. Like I didn't go to my eighth grade dance. I didn't go to this
Yeah.
and that. I was just a very serious, focused kid. Knew what I wanted. Knew that martial arts was what I wanted to do. It was like my priority, my number one. Everything else came last, honestly. Um, so I just think that's kind of like where it stems from, and I have carried that seriousness throughout my whole entire life, which is a good and bad thing, but um, I'll take it as mostly a good thing.
Right. And to do all the stuff you've done, Sammy, and to be able to, which I want to talk to you about travel in the different countries, which had to be awesome. But you have to have people that support you, and you've had very supportive parents. And talk about them a little bit because it's never easy when parents are working full time jobs to give up, to sacrifice weekends, to take their children to these tournaments. Because sometimes you got to go out of state. And as for you, you've went out of country. So talk about how supportive your parents have been throughout your martial arts life and your everyday life.
Yeah, they were very supportive. Both my parents would come to my tournaments. They took me to train with Matt and Daniel. They took me to my tournaments in different countries. They were always ringside, whether recording or playing music. They were always there. Um, my mom was actually like one of the first people who put together like my nunchuck form in my living room, like one of my first forms before I started working with Matt, which I think is really funny. Um, that she put together first. But yeah, and then even after I started working with Matt and Daniel, my mom would always be in my little studio room that I had, like watching my forms to make sure that everything looked good. So that definitely had a lot to do with my progression. And as you've said, I've progressed pretty quick just because I've had a lot of eyes on me and watching my
Yeah.
stuff. A lot of people don't really have that. So that's something for me to be grateful for, that I had a lot of people like looking over my routine to make sure I was doing things correctly and everything looked good the way that it had to look. And we in my old house, we did construction, and my dad, made sure that I had basically a little makeshift studio. It was before COVID, obviously. So a lot of people
Yeah.
nowadays they have home dojos, but this was when like those didn't really exist.
Yeah.
Um, and I had my own little room that was like similar to like the size of a ring, but super nice, good mats, mirrors, everything you could want. And I owe a lot to that room because I literally put all like I could just walk downstairs and train at any time. There have been times I would train at midnight. There would be times I trained super early. There would be times I would train between my college classes, and
Yeah.
it's super convenient to just have that. And I think also having that, definitely helped me get better faster.
Right. In 2009, Sammy, it was a big moment for you as well because I think any martial artist, and again, I will preface this with I'm not an expert, but I think being on the cover or inside Black Belt magazine is a big honor for anybody. And that happened for you in 2009. So you were, oh, it wasn't. Okay. I thought
No.
maybe I got it wrong, but I do believe eventually you got on the cover of that. And
Yes.
what was that experience like? Because that had to be just like, then you knew, you know what, I've made it in this sport.
Yeah, actually, it was last this past summer that I got a cover of Black Hat magazine. Um,
I think maybe it was an ad. I was thinking about that you did a uniform ad or something like that because I'm just looking at the notes and that's what it said. Yeah.
well, I think I did do something for Tiger Claw magazine
Yes.
back
Yeah.
then. But Black Belt magazine, like we've discussed, Black Belt magazine is like one of the top brands in the martial arts industry. It
Yeah.
always has been, and luckily for me, I've actually had a lot to do with that company lately. Like we've talked about, Jackson, Rudolph, and myself have a have a
A blog.
product,
Yeah.
Sport Karate University. And I've also lately been writing fitness, but mostly sport karate articles for them. I really like to write, and I like to write about things that I'm passionate about. So it's been pretty fun to write some articles for them and work with them in that sense. But to be on the cover of Black Belt magazine, I'm waiting for the time that I get a whole picture to myself of just me
Yeah.
on the cover. But I'll take what I could get with that, and it was really cool to see myself on the cover because that's like one of every martial artist, serious competitor's dreams to like be on that, because they sell that magazine in a lot of places. There was like that magazine in like food stores,
Yeah.
in Barnes and Noble, like places like that, that just sell that magazine to like the general public. So it's like really cool. It's like much bigger than just martial arts.
Right. And correct me if I'm wrong. You have a blog on there too that you do every once in a while as well, correct?
Yep, those are those articles
Yeah.
that I was just
Right.
talking
Those
about.
articles.
Yeah.
Right. So, Sammy, let me ask you this: what what was like the first big tournament that you competed in? And I'll say more so for Paul Mitchell, which we'll get to that too, getting to be a part of that team. But what was the one tournament that you were really pumped up about? Was it the Battle of Atlanta, because that's a big tournament and you did win that tournament? So was there any particular one that stands out to you?
Um, One of my favorite stories, and it's kind of like an underdog tale, is in 2015 I moved up to the adult division.
Yeah,
How it works in NASCA is if you have a late birthday, like a birthday after, I forgot what the cutoff date was, but it's sometime in June, you get to stay in your division like an extra year because your birthday is late.
yeah,
And because my birthday's in July, that was always the case for me. But when I was 17, turning 18, I was kind of done with the junior divisions. I've spent so much time in there. I wanted to like move on. I wanted to win money because in the adults you get to win money. So I was like, all
yeah,
right, when I turn 18, I'm gonna move up. So I competed in the adult division at Capital Classics, but right shortly after that was the Diamond Nationals. And in our circuit, there are a few big tournaments, Diamond Nationals being one of them, because if you win, you get a diamond ring, and it's like the
right.
prestige of like winning a diamond ring. So at that point, I've never won a diamond ring. I've never won a diamond ring as a junior, but I was ready to move up to the adults. I wasn't expecting anything because I've had not the greatest luck in the juniors as far as rings, winning rings go.
Yeah,
And I had just gotten on Paul Mitchell like not too long ago at this time either, and I was like the big dog in juniors, but now I was the underdog in the adults because I had just moved up,
yeah,
and I won the weapons overall that night, and I was like, whoa, like I can't believe it, this is crazy.
yeah,
And then I wasn't expecting anything else to happen, and I ended up winning the forms overall that same night. And I was like, "Whoa! I never won a diamond ring. Now I'm winning two in one night, like on Paul Mitchell as the underdog." So that was probably like one of the best moments in my sport karate career.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, that's a tournament that I look forward to every year, because as you mentioned, I have 7 diamond rings. The record is 8. I tried to make history this past year. Unfortunately, it didn't really work in my favor, but I'm not going to give up. I would love to win 9 and just set the record and set the bar. But I would, of course, be happy if I could just tie it at 8. Because right now,
right.
like I've said, I'm at the second most amount of diamond rings.
Right. And I'm going to get to that in a second. But in 2015 as well, it was another big moment for you because you were recognized as the competitor of the year in sports martial arts. And I mean, it's got to be a great feeling when people recognize you as being the best competitor, because that means that all that commitment and devotion that you give to this sport pays off when people recognize you, because there's so many great athletes that are competing in this. And for you to be the one they pick, that just has to make you it validates you as a martial artist.
Yeah, of course I'm grateful for that. Yeah, there's not much to say about that. I'm
And I
grateful.
think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think you've been recognized at least 3 times for that competitor of the year. And that,
Yeah,
I mean, whenever you do it more than once, I mean, let me ask you too, when you receive all these honors and you want to continue to be the best, you mentioned the 7 rings and stuff, do you ever like, does it become like almost academic for you, automatic, or do you still feel a sense of joy every time you win because you've had so many great moments? Do they become muddled at all, or is it still a great feeling?
I think as I've gotten older, the winnings have become a little bit more sentimental,
Yeah.
because of what is going on in my life that's pushing me to get like, all right, I need to get this win because of this, or this is happening, so I'm really motivated to get this win. And I it's I've been competing for such a long time and I've won so much, not to sound like cocky or anything like that, but I really don't need to prove myself anymore. I've really won
Yeah.
a lot. Like I've really won everything there is to win. But it's when I do win, there's probably more meaning behind it now than there was when I was like 11, where I was just trying to win a first place and be happy with that. And then it was just like I was racking up those wins.
Right. And think about this, Sammy. In 2007, you were inducted into the New England Open Hall of Fame. They made you a member. And you were what, 6 or 7 years old at the time? So you couldn't appreciate it probably as much back then. But you have to look back on that and say, oh my God, I can't believe that I did this at such a young age. I mean, you got to be proud of that.
Yeah, honestly, I don't even remember that, but it's probably true. In
Yeah.
2007, I was 9, I want to say.
9.
So it
Okay.
is pretty
Yeah.
crazy as a 9-year-old to be inducted to the Hall of Fame. But yeah, I mean, I'm grateful for everything. They all add to my martial arts story. And it's like podcasts like this that I get like reminded of those accomplishments and to take like a step back and realize, because like I said, I've been doing this for such a long time. Sometimes I kind of forget in a way. So it's good to like be reminded of like my story, um, because I'm not retired. I'm not retiring, but I've been in this for a while. So it's kind of coming full circle in a way. So it's cool to be reminded of all the little like accomplishments that I've had starting from such a young age.
Right. And I'm sure I know the answer to this, but a friend I have, he's been in martial arts for a long time. And he told me when he was a kid and he would compete, the biggest fear he had was getting in front of an audience because you have to have your game face on. And he said at times he would get the butterflies right before it, but then he'd go out there and they'd go away. I
Mhm.
mean, were there ever butterflies before a competition? I mean, you seem so cool and collective, but I'm sure there was a part of you that was nervous every competition early on.
I'm always nervous.
Always.
That never goes away. It's just
Yeah.
like you have to kind of become a master of not letting them get to you, because when they get to you, that's when you start dropping. That's when you start stumbling, and they all things that you won't win if you do. So like I've said, that's why it's like that's in the beginning of this podcast. That's why I said it's a very mentally challenging and sometimes draining, because there's a lot of pressure that you put on yourself for this. But I am always nervous. Those feelings never go away. Especially like at certain tournaments, like the Diamond Nationals, where there's like pressure on me to make history, or something like that. There's definitely um, you know more to it, for me. Does add like extra pressure, and it would make me a little more nervous than, I don't know, a different tournament or just something for a division.
Right. Now, Sammy, one of the things I wanted to bring up too about this, because this is, and again, I will say it for the third time, I'm not an expert, but when I watch these performers compete, sometimes I hear the announcer say, wow, she didn't have her best stuff today, or he was off today. And again, I don't really know a lot, but I do know this, that I've never seen any of these competitors have an off night. Now, maybe they didn't win, only one person can. But does it bother you sometimes when announcers or media kind of say things like that? Because to me, everybody that goes out there gives their best, and I never look at it as he had an off night or she wasn't on her game. What do you think about that?
Um, To be honest, I don't think that it's common for people to talk like that. It has happened to me a couple
Yeah.
of times.
Yeah.
It's just personal. It's just how you take it. Like, but usually, you know, honestly, I've never really heard people talk like that. But everybody has like performances that you do and you feel like
Yeah.
amazing, and then you do and you're like, eh. And then it's ironic because sometimes when you don't think that you deserve to win, you win, and sometimes when
Yeah.
you deserve to win, you don't. So it's
Yeah.
just all in the hands of the judges sometimes.
Right.
Um,
And I think for the most part, the judges are very fair. I mean, I think they do a good job as far as that goes. I just think when you've got young people out there competing, I think to me, they always bring their A game. And sometimes, like I said, only one person could win and runner ups and stuff like that. That's going to happen. But I think everybody that goes out there and does this, they're a credit to this sport.
mhm. I
Right.
agree. Yeah.
So another thing that I think, Sammy, was a big honor for you because I think you've kind of looked up to this person in the martial arts field is I think 2011 or 2012 you got to meet, and if I say his last name wrong I apologize, but John Paul DeGoria or DeGoria, however you say his name. Talk about that because I know that was a big honor for you to get to take a picture with him, stuff like that.
Yeah. John Paul DeJoria, he is has a lot to do with Paul Mitchell. He's owns Patron. He's a great person. Like I got to meet him in 2011 at a tournament, but I didn't really get to meet him until the 2017 Super Show in Las Vegas, where he
Right.
was there. And he spoke. He was like a keynote speaker at the Maya Super Show. King Paul Mitchell performed for him. He was super nice guy, super down to earth, like great human being. And we actually got to eat breakfast with him, so that was a really cool moment. Um, yeah, like super grateful that King Paul Mitchell gets to represent him and what he stands for. So, of course, it was an honor to meet him. He's a really accomplished person.
Right. And another person you were fortunate enough to meet throughout your career, and again, I'm going to botch this last name, but Hans Weakerling, or however his last name is said. I know I'm pronouncing it wrong, but talk about that a little bit.
Um, Hans
Hans. Okay. Yeah.
was a great. He was a great guy. We did a demo together. He brought a lot of creative influence, and a couple of years ago, unfortunately, he passed away. So, um, but yeah, Hans was a great competitor, great guy. I was teammates with him, so spent some time with him, and he brought a cool influence to sport karate. But it's unfortunate, what happened. But
Right.
I even at one of the past Diamond Nationals, I wrote like it was like around the time that like he unfortunately passed away. I like wrote on my hand. I was like for Hans or something like that, or something like that. And I even dedicated like one of my diamond ring performances for him
Yeah.
that night. It was 2019 Diamond Nationals, I believe. I ended up winning that, but it was
Yeah.
really cool to just do something like that for him because he was, a great influence on sport karate.
Right. Now, Sammy, talk a little bit about the amount of times you travel for these events, and you've left the country a few times. I think you competed in Spain. You mentioned Russia and stuff like that. Just talk about that experience. What is that like? And I mean, do the plane rides sometimes make you antsy being up there all that time? I mean, talk about that a little bit.
No, plane rides don't make me
Yeah.
antsy. Like I
Yeah.
just kind of been so used to it since I was like 7 traveling. It's just kind of
Right.
something that's just normal. It's annoying, like with a long plane ride. That's no fun. No one really ever wants to sit on a plane for that long. But
Yeah.
when you travel to those cool places, it's something you can't get away from that. So I have some tournaments that we're able to drive to, but a lot of them you have to fly. So yeah, it's just part of normal life for me.
Right. But you got to see so many different parts of the world. That had to be a great experience, correct?
Yeah, like Spain was awesome. There was a lot of cool things in Spain. I was there for the WKA tournament in 2009. I won like 5 gold medals there. It's a beautiful place to be. Russia was really cool. Like I said, I got to go into the government building and see
Yeah.
all the cool architectural buildings. Again, at such a young age, and also I am Russian, so it's kind of cool to go to like a country that you know I'm have like blood too, I guess you could
Yeah.
say. But yeah.
And Sammy, who talk to me a little bit about some of the teammates over the years or people you've been in touch with or trained with, stuff like that, who have had a big impact on your career. Just talk about some of them a little bit.
Oh, definitely think that like I've talked about him before, Jackson Rudolph, who
Right.
is my teammate. We are co-founders of the Sport Karate University together. Um, he's been a great friend of mine since I was like 10, so I spent like a long time of my life knowing Jackson and um, you know, got to be teammates on Team Paul Mitchell. He was on Paul Mitchell before I was, but it was cool to kind of like, join him on the team and become, teammates with him and also friends with him. Um, and then also a big person who we kind of went back and forth with, but a lot of the part of what made me so good is because of this girl named Mackenzie Emery. Her and we were right at
Yes.
the top of the divisions, and you know, everyone always wanted to watch her and I perform because it could go either way, depending on the day, depending on the division. It was never like, oh, this person's definitely going to beat this person. It was always like it could go either way. So that is kind of she is what helped me stay on top of my game and really just become the best. And I think a lot of the reason why I am who I am today and how I am so good is because of how we pushed each other. Um, so
Right.
between Jackson and her, I think those are probably the two most important people as far as competition teammates, go.
Right. So, Sammy, talk a little bit about your everyday life because I believe that when you went to Hofstra University, you majored in sports nutrition and you recently were certified in that. So, talk a little bit about that because that's just another part of your life that you continue to dedicate yourself with. And you're part of the International Society of Sports Nutrition, correct?
Well, I went to Hofstra for exercise science, which is kind of along the lines of the same thing. Everything's like very
Right.
similar. I took a sports nutrition class, and through that class, you could earn a certification.
Right.
And then last year, I went back to grad school, but it was online, so it was like a little weird. And so I started to go back to my master's for exercise science, and it's kind of like put on pause right now. But I went to school for exercise science because I love the whole strength and conditioning. It's been part of my martial arts, routine, getting stronger and that. So it was very relatable. And exercise science is a lot more difficult than like you would think. Like it's not just like learning about exercises. Like that's not what it is. It's like actually learning the systems of your body and how your body works, and
Right.
just there's a lot more to it that goes on than people would think. So I do have a certification in sports nutrition. And like I said, I have a degree in exercise science, but I've been really fortunate to meet and work with who was my professor as my master degree in exercise science, Tony Ritchie. He become my strength and conditioning
Yeah.
coach. I actually saw him yesterday, and he's also another person who has a pretty big influence on just my training and my life, and somebody who is a good mentor to have. So I'm also really grateful that, being in this martial arts world, being in the strength and conditioning world has got me to have connections with all these people who are much more than just friends. They're like literally like these people are like meant to be in your life.
Right. And not too long ago, you co founded the PreProfessional Club for Exercise and Medicine. How has that been going?
I did that when I was in Hofstra, so that was a few years ago. It's cool to be a co-founder of a club. Unfortunately, I don't go to Hofstra anymore, so I
Yeah.
don't really have much to do with the club anymore. But it was cool in the moment while I was there to be a co-founder because that club was new. at the time. So it was cool to just, we had weekly meetings. We would discuss. A lot of people that you had classes with were also in the club. So everyone was like, it was like a tight knit group of people. So we were all friends. We did, like we made this video for Hofstra. It was like, it was cool. It was a cool thing to be part of and right up my alley. So I felt like, you know, it was like a good feeling to be surrounded by people who also have the same interests as you. So it was definitely a really good experience to be part of that club and to be able to say a co-founder. It sounds also really good.
Right. And you touched on Jackson Rudolph and what you two are doing with the sport karate university thing. I think is awesome. But talk about being an instructor. What do you enjoy more, competing or being an instructor? Because I know some people who coach and they used to be players. They love the coaching aspect of it more. Which one do you like more, and how has the teaching been going?
They're both very different. As I transition in my sport karate career, I started as a student for a competition and I was a serious competitor. And as you become a serious competitor, you become more well known and then you kind of become a teacher. So it's kind of just like a transition throughout your career, what happens if you're good enough and people want to learn from you. So they're both very different. Obviously, I'm still a competitor and I'm a teacher at the same time. I want to own a martial arts studio as my career, which hopefully will happen very soon. So
Right.
not so, like, it's always something that's within you. And I don't think I could pick one or the other because they both taught me things and they've both added to my life in different ways.
Right.
So I can't pick one over the other, but it's just part of the process.
Right. So let's talk about the seven rings, which is just unbelievable. And I mean, like I said, you're the type of person who never will rest on her laurels. You continue to just do great things out there. But talk about that because I remember Derek Jeter when he was giving his Hall of Fame speech. He said that his goal before he retired was, I wanted to win more than anybody else in baseball. And it seems like that's the mindset you have, which you should have, is that you want to be the best. I mean, you don't just want to be a black belt. You don't just want to be in martial arts. You want to be the best. And that's why you've done so well. So just talk about what you went through to go and getting those seven rings.
Well, like I said, it started off as me being the underdog and winning the first two diamond rings. And then at that point, I was like, all right, I have two. Came back the next year, got another two. I was like, okay, that looks like I could win double. Then I believe I won one, two, four, five. And then I don't think I won any the next year. And then 2019, I won double again. So I've, been winning these double diamond rings for some years now. And it's kind of just become a game of like, let's see how many I could collect because you're a diamond ring collector. And like I've said, everyone wants to win a diamond ring. They want to see how many they can get. I want to set the record. So it was kind of just like, oh, okay, I got it. All right, I got it again. All right, let's see like what else I can do. But you always want to be the best. If you don't want to be the best, why are you competing? Like that should be the mindset. Like, why are you doing this if you don't want to be the best? So that's why I've said I'm a very serious person, and it's always been my mindset. Like I just want to win.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's not always about winning. So the sport is what you make of it. The sport is what you take. But why wouldn't you want to be the best at something that you're doing? Why wouldn't you want to be well known? Like that's just my mindset. Like if I'm gonna do it, and that's me for everything in my life. If I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do 100%. I'm not gonna halfway do something. I'm not gonna like kind of do something. It's either I'm all in or I'm not. And so because of how serious I am about martial arts and competing, I want to be the best. I want to be. When somebody thinks about one of the best female martial artists, I'm one of the names, or the best nunchuckers, I'm one of the names.
Right.
So yeah, that's been my motivation to just compete and to become better.
Now it'd probably get uncomfortable to wear seven of them out and about. Is there one particular ring you'll always wear with you every day, or you don't really wear them too much?
No, I don't wear them. They just stay. Some people wear them, but I don't.
Right. So, Sammy, before we go, what advice would you give to let's just say a kid who has earned their black belt and they want to continue to rise in the world of martial arts? They want to make their mark. What advice would you give to them going forward?
To be original. A lot of people nowadays just want to be like whoever's winning, and it's good. And I tell my students this all the time: it's good to have influence, it's good to be inspired, but you don't want to be a copycat of somebody else. The best way to become well known is to be yourself. Obviously you have to have clean techniques. You don't want to just be throwing things to throw them. Do it with good form, do it with good technique, but develop your own style, because that's what's going to set you apart from everybody else. I think my style is very different. Like, yes, I have influence from Matt Emig and my chucks, and Daniel from my forms, and Matt and my forms as well. But I have my own sense of style. I do it the way that, like, I try to come up with different ideas that I don't see anyone else doing. So especially if you're a sport karate competitor, you want to be different. If you're just a general martial artist, if you really enjoy it, just do it and, see where it takes you. But, it's martial arts is a very serious sport. So you have to be willing to just be committed to it and put the work in that it is, required of you to do and excel in it.
Well, I think that's awesome, Sammy, and I really want to thank you for coming on. First off, congratulations on everything that you've done throughout your career,
Thank
and I am really rooting for you to get those 9 rings.
you.
I really believe you will, because you just have that passion for it. But I think the legacy that you've left on the martial arts world is something so remarkable, and it gives everybody who's up and coming something to be inspired by. And I think that's what you do more than anything else, is you inspire athletes everywhere who are in this sport. So thank you again for coming on, and I really do appreciate it.
Yes, thank you for all the kind words. I do appreciate that a lot as well. I always want to look to inspire people, the new generation, the up and coming generation, because they're what's going to keep the sport alive. Because people did that for me. I was at what point what these kids are now, and it's just really good to just keep the sport alive and keep the sport going, and just try to help it grow as much as possible. So thanks for letting me share my story a little bit, and really I hope that I can, even if you don't do martial arts, I hope that what we talked about could inspire other people in their life as well too.
Well, I really do appreciate it, and thank you for coming on again. It was an honor for me.
Thank you.
Well, there you have it, folks. You just watched an hour of an amazing human being who has done so many wonderful things throughout her martial arts career. Think about this, folks. She was a young 4-year-old kid who had a goal at 4 years old that she wanted to be in martial arts. She never let anything stop her. And for 20 years now, she is up there with any athlete in any sport anywhere. She goes out and gives 150% with everything she does. Her dedication and devotion is why she has been so successful. But think about this. She's the type of kid who wants to keep being the best that she could be. She inspires millions every single day. And I think there are 3 letters that stand out about her in 3 words when I think of Sammy Smith. It's warrior, champion, legend. And to me, that's who she is. And we look forward to seeing her continue to be the best in the world. For Hometown Heroes, I'm Mike Kenichi saying good night, everyone.